Welcome to A Dram of Outlander. This is Desiree, your podcaster and the writer for ADramOfOutlander.com. For all things Outlander, from the Diana Gabaldon book series to the Starz TV series and anything interesting that falls between. This is podcast episode 179. And we are talking about Between Two Fires, season 5, episode 2, directed by Stephen Wolfenden and co-written by Tony Graffia and Luke Skillhouse. Hello, hello, hello. I hope you've had a fantastic week. We are all back into Outlander mania Saturday evenings or early Sunday, depending on your time zone. In California, they can watch it at 9 o'clock p.m. on Saturday nights. In Hawaii, they can watch it at like 4 p.m. And and on the East Coast time, it's at 12:01 a.m. Sunday morning. So it just depends on your time zone. At my house, because we're in the mountain time zone, we can watch at 10 p.m. on Saturday nights. So it's not too much of a hardship to stay up and watch it. So I'm really looking forward to hearing what you thought about this episode. Last week's episode really had a lot of positives. I only saw one negative about it, and I think, like I said last week, that it's very, very important to leave everything but the bare bones of the adapted material behind. Like, we're in season 5, and there's been some twists and turns, and The Fiery Cross is a really big book. A really big book. And there is no way that every single detail, every character, everything can come to life on screen. It is impossible unless I did it over 2 full seasons with, 16 episodes each? We get one season of 12 episodes. Now, again, I think it's brilliant that the gathering was left out and it was combined with the wedding at the Ridge. I think they described every element necessary to moving the story forward, and it made a lot of sense. One thing that I was mistaken on is the fact that Murtagh was taking the place of some characters that we may have expected. However, that is not the case. Husband and Hunter, who are part of the Regulators, were central key characters, and we met them this episode. Well, we got a glancing blow of them in this episode. And so that tells me even more that Husband and Hunter are going to be around even when Murtagh isn't. So that's my big declaration, is that I do think that Murtagh is going to die. He can't go back to Scotland. It's not safe. He gets sent back over, gets sent to the Americas. It's not safe for him there either. Where is he going to go in the colonies where it's safe for him? Is he going to leave and go to Canada? So I really do think that his character, the way they have set him up, and now that Jaime has released him from his oath, that I think he's being set up to die this season or just be gone. So perhaps Murtagh will go northward to Canada. I'm sorry, that's what we call it in my house. I love my Canadian friends. So perhaps Murtagh will be going to Canada. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that? I can't see that after this really firm break between him and Jaime, and the fact that his character was set up to where he would not bide his time for the American Revolution, that's just a few years away, that he won't be part of that. That he may not be in for the long haul is what I'm thinking, is that he's Murtagh walking. Dead man on Fraser's Ridge. So, and so the very opening credits, we really got to see a dark side of Murtagh. And that dark side comes from a very virtuous place in his mind. And again, we had sort of the self-righteous anger that he could justify in what he was doing in Hillsborough, and really spurring, correct word, spurring the regulator group on to doing these acts of violence and decimation. And at the end of the episode, we see darkness and violence, but it's completely self-motivated. There's no greater purpose to it. So again, maybe that's showing being between, the kind of the yin and yang, the light and dark. But I do think that what Stephen Bonnet did at the end, though it's very self-righteous and for himself and self-motivated because he's very mercenary, and he thinks anything he does to get to his end, to his goals, is absolutely justifiable, and it has nothing to do with anybody else getting anywhere. He doesn't care what he does along the way or who he hurts. To him, it's just, I'm doing it. So his outrageous and horrendous act of violence is the really deep underbelly, where I think Murtagh, it's a lashing out from all that he has been subjected to, because his character in the show, since he's alive, he experienced everything at Ardsmuir prison. And then he was sent over to the colonies, and he was under the hand of an abusive overseer. And we learned that very quickly. And so he was not treated well in the colonies. So, though he's sided with the regulators and doesn't believe in this corrupt taxation and how people are being treated and that their voices aren't being heard individually or collectively, that he can justify that violence. I mean, tarring and feathering, people died from that. I mean, our skin is our largest organ, so imagine how bad just the burn itself is. But you have a foreign substance and you have feathers which carry their own diseases. So I can imagine that the first man that they showed, where they covered his head and chest, which was really shocking. When you see that, the man died, most likely from his injuries. And the man who was still alive in the episode, he would have been disfigured forever. His skin was melted. And for him to be talking like that, I was like, there's no way, with the amount of pain and agony he would be in, he would probably, I would think, only so many days later, not be able to be consciously speaking without being in terrific pain. And I will include a link about the real Hillsborough riot. It did happen. Fanning is a real person, as we talked about way back when, last episode, and when I was starting the Fiery Cross read-along, he was discussed. So I'll put those links in the written portion. But I don't believe that they actually tarred and feathered anyone, but it did happen in the books, as well as it did happen in reality in that time period. I mean, it's so awful and inhumane. But we saw that really dark side to Murtagh. And as we ventured into the episode and we see Jaime really struggling to balance the oaths and loyalties and duties that he has. Like, to him, it's his people. He has a very clear vision. And if he has to make a deal with the devil for X amount of time to get where he needs to be for the best future for his people, he's going to do it. And he doesn't see that as being underhanded because he's going to follow through with his pledges wherever he's at. So the devil's Tryon and the crown, right? And so Jaime's like, I have this oath. I'm going to follow this through. There'll be a day where I have to turn coat and become an American. Like, he knows that's coming because he has the gift of foresight, because he has 3 20th century people living with him. Even though Claire's not great help being, an English woman, she doesn't remember all the history. Brianna can tell him a lot. But this battle, it's not really even quite a battle, but it, elements that's coming up with the regulators is so obscure and small. There's not a lot of information on it. It's like the Hillsborough riots. You can find it, but the regulators were very isolated in North Carolina in comparison to what was going on in the other colonies. And the things in the other colonies kind of made big news, where the information in North Carolina didn't make big news. I mean, it's not something I learned about in history outside of the whole of this, it's like the whole of the slave trade and how those things happened and what they were and where it was. We didn't, in basic commerce, and some very key things I never heard about the regulators until I started really diving into history and looking at where's this location, what were these people like, what did they believe, right? And so Jaime's having to really walk that razor's edge line that he's having to it's like a tightrope. And he's doing the best he can, but it's in this particular instance, because of Murtagh and because of the oath that he swore to the crown and to Tryon, the paper he signed, he's obligated to fight for the crown and to get that militia. And I loved seeing him coming from a position of strength and really trying to create his own reality in this. And trying really hard to protect Murtagh and the regulators, because he does believe in it. He just doesn't believe in the acts that they're doing. And to uphold his end of the bargain, because that's his duty. And to keep his land and all the people that are now relying on him. So I really loved seeing that. And I liked how they took Knox and Jaime and really showed, how people can be on opposing sides and be coming at it for the same reasons. And you don't have to believe in what the other person's doing. Gosh, I think a lot of people in our current U.S. cultural climate, could really learn something about that. I think you can. I think you can have integrity and loyalty and duty and honor, even if it's something that somebody else doesn't believe in. I think how you approach it can be that way. And currently in our political climate, it's like, if you don't believe this, then you're stupid and you're an idiot. And it's just all about bullying and name calling and closing of ears. There's no actual discourse or listening to other people. And even when I vehemently disagree with a point of view, I do my due diligence and do my very best to understand them philosophically and to figure out where they're coming from. Why do they believe it? It humanizes them to me. And it makes it really hard for me just to make blanket statements or to call somebody hateful or other mean-spirited names. And Jaime is a philosopher. Gentleman philosopher, absolutely. Where he understands people. And when he's having this conversation with Knox, he can really try to bring out the best in Knox and Knox's best intentions and try to bring it forward. for the sake of himself, but also sake for the people that Jamie's trying to protect. And the people he's trying to protect, he's trying to get them to do certain things in order to make it best for everyone. Now, is that possible? I don't know. This was very difficult for him this episode. But I really do like that they showed him in a position of strength. He did not have a position of weakness. He was doing his own thing and doing it well. The other thing that I found interesting is that the forthrightness that Jamie has is like, it doesn't off-put anyone. It doesn't seem odd coming from a man, but it still seems odd coming from the women. I mean, because we're kind of steeped in the culture of that time, right? Even though it's not our time. In order to really understand what was going on then, I think it behooves the viewer to understand really what's happening. And I'll come back to that in a minute because it has to do with Brianna, which I actually really liked kind of the turn they took with her character. That was one of the real big positives for me. So we really got to see the aftermath of what happened at Hillsborough. And I think it was probably worse than that in reality. With our modern crews and it being sets and all. And something that happened, I think, to really show the other side of, say, what Murtaugh was inciting, was that when Jamie and Knox went to go visit the jail, and one of the men, said, "I'm Murtaugh Fitzgibbons," and spit at Knox, and Knox ended up, after trying to get information from him, putting a sword through his abdomen. He was caught up in it. And he was ashamed at first for becoming what he was fighting. But then he twisted it around to say, oh, well, I gave him a good death, basically. I gave him a death better than he would have gotten if he hanged in New Bern. The other two aren't going to get a death this good. Not a soldier's death. And I thought, wow, you just talked yourself right into that, didn't you? But Murtaugh did the same thing. Where he was like, where were you when these people couldn't eat because of their taxes and yada, yada, yada. Or Murtaugh justified his behavior and goading them to do these acts of violence. It's really easy to get swept up in a mob mentality. We literally share hormones. So if this stuff, I don't know if you've ever been to an event where, say at a big rock concert or something, and the mood can just shift on a dime. And it's like, I remember being at a Lollapalooza years ago in the early 90s. And, oh gosh, I remember which band came out now. But it was a really serious, heavy metal band. And it was a darker band. And as soon as they came on stage, the whole vibe of the crowd shifted. And I was like, I'm out. So I worked my way out of the crowd and just went to where all the tents were set up in the shops. I think I went and got my nose pierced or something. I think that's what I went and did. I was like, I'll get a piercing. It's safer than being in that crowd right now. But it can change. If there's adrenaline around us, we get filled with adrenaline. So where there's peace, we're peaceful. Where there's rising emotion, we get that too. Humans share all of that. It's actually a chemical thing that we do. So once people get caught up in that mob mentality, and actually Diana does a good job of explaining it in the book, when they're talking about Hillsborough at the gathering and what happened, and they're looking for men, looking for the perpetrators, right? And where she goes in details, and someone's like, I don't even know what happened. I just got swept up. And you do. And I don't know if it happens to women as readily as to men, because testosterone, Claire's right, it's testosterone poisoning. Testosterone is a whole nother animal compared to estrogen and progesterone. That's not knocking men. We need that because men generally are the ones who go and grab up weapons and fight. There are some amazing women soldiers and fighters, but that's not inherently what we normally do. I don't think. I don't believe I'm being sexist. I think that's just, we are wired differently. We're not the same, different sexes. And I do think that men get caught up into this fever pitch a little easier than women do, though I've seen women crowds go bad. Anyway, so it's interesting to have Knox have that response of being overtaken and overwhelmed in the moment and do something regrettable. But then he just talked himself right out of it being regrettable, just like Murtagh did, justifying themselves. So how Jaime ends up dealing with this conflict because he can't quite get Knox to make amends and make it easier for the two regulators that are in jail. And these were men, that we saw last season when Jaime was trying to give out land, right, for people coming to settle on the ridge. And he lets them out of jail and lets them sneak out. And that's when he finds out about Murtagh and what Murtagh's involvement was, which was shocking to him. But his way of dealing with it was he let them out so they wouldn't hang in New Bern. And it's just ugly. And Knox flips out over this, basically, and says, be prepared for war. We need more men in this militia. So I really liked seeing Jaime on his own without Claire this episode. I liked him being in his own strength, in his own mind. And he is really showing those elements of being like the king of men. He's doing what he believes is right. He is standing up and he's figuring his way around it. And he has his own philosophy. He has his own way of looking at, again, honor and duty and how it's important. And he doesn't justify it. He has his own morality surrounding what his choices are. And he can tell you in the short term why, and he can tell you in the long term. But I do think that's because he is a very thoughtful, very well educated man who has also been a laird, and he's also been an outlaw, and he has this really well-rounded point of view. And even though in the show, he's not super religious in the way he is in the books, they allowed already this season for his religious nature, his foundation to show. Him being upset they had a Presbyterian minister. Him telling his grandson, Germain, that they're heretics. And in this episode, Roger even brought it up that, them having Jeremiah baptized by a Presbyterian, I think it was a Presbyterian, pastor, that, it's heresy. And Brianna's like, well, at least there's two heretics now. You're not alone. So she's taking it in stride. So we are getting to see that kind of grit and that grip on him. And he can explain it. So I'm kind of grouping this together in the context of a character's scenes and storyline instead of bouncing back and forth. I I organized it in the way of all the way through with Knox and Jamie and the regulators, and then all the way through with Claire and everybody who's involved with Claire. It makes it so much simpler for me this week. So we see that the two that Jamie allowed out of the prison or jail, it wasn't really a prison, was it? They go back to the camp where the regulators are, and they meet up with Murtaugh, who asks them the password, which is Castle Dune. I was like, oh, I love it. That's fun. And then they would get to meet Mr. Husband and Mr. Hunter. Though Mr. Husband, way, is not Quaker. We didn't really meet them, though. It was just, hey, this is Mr. Husband and this is Mr. Hunter. And Mr. Husband got like a line or so. So we didn't really meet them. They were a drive-by. Hey, I think I know. Okay, you seem familiar. But they're there. So the fact that Husband and Hunter are there, again, tells me that Murtaugh is dead man walking. What do you think? Send me an email, contact@adreamofoutlander.com, or leave me a voicemail, 719-425-9444. That's the voicemail line, 719-425-9444. But I want to know, do you think Murtaugh is going to live? Or if Murtaugh is going to die? Or if Murtaugh is going to run for Canada? Odds on for me are that he's going to die. Because I think his character's purpose has been run through. The interesting thing about Murtaugh is that he is the one who absolutely understands, and he even said that Jamie is walking between two fires and Jamie stands by his people. And that's exactly what Murtaugh is doing. So he gets the fact that they are on opposite sides of a coin right now, but they both are there for the same purpose. And I love that he stood up for Jamie. And that Jamie, in his own way, is standing up for Murtaugh by letting the guys go and trying to, send everybody off his scent. Okay, so that's really Jamie. And we're going to see this coming to a head, I presume, next episode or the one after at the furthest. I can't see that it's going to go past maybe episode 4. It wasn't in the previews, but I don't know. I'm trying to figure out where it's going to fit. Probably episode 4. We'll see. I haven't looked at all the name titles again. I'm just loving being kind of surprised with everybody else right now. Okay. So if we move on to the Ridge storyline, because they're very distinct, right? Is that we have the opening credit with all this bread. And that's a foreshadowing of something to come in this episode and really highlights Claire's aggravation with current 18th century medical standards. Okay, now I just want to say, this is Claire's second trip. It's on purpose. Now she's been in the past for several years now. Years. Since she left the 20th. She was there for a few years the first time. And this time she's going back with really gifted surgical skills on top of it. So just let that ruminate. Think on that. Really just stick it in there. And there's a reason I'm saying that. She didn't just fall into this place for the first time, not knowing what is going on and how people think. She knows that her saying she's a physician, people are going to sneer at her. And since when does she care what title she goes by if she can just do her job? in the sense of she knows she's going to be viewed substandard to a man because she's in the 18th century, or she should know that. I think she has known that, but I don't think she knows that in this episode. Okay. So it's really difficult for me to kind of break apart the different things that are happening to Brianna, to Roger, to Claire, to Marcelly in this episode. Why? Because they're very intricately connected. Just like almost everything Jamie did had Knox connected to him and Murtaugh connected, the threads connected to Claire are very tight. She's not alone in this episode. So I'm just going to kind of go through what was happening on the ridge. So Brianna continues to be very troubled because she knows that Bonnet's alive, though nobody knows she knows this. And she's sitting by a tree sketching another dark image of Bonnet. And while she's doing this, a buggy comes up the road and a woman is yelling for help for her ill husband, that he can't breathe. And oh, we meet the bugs, but we don't really meet the bugs. They're a drive-by. So maybe we'll see them again and we'll meet them more fully. We don't even really get much context for them. So like husband and Hunter, they're like, hey, here are these people that might have some importance. We're going to mention at least Mrs. Bug a couple of times. We're going to have her here so you can keep your eye out for her. But we haven't been introduced to them. They just kind of show up in the scenery. And I think that must have been Arch Bug out on the porch with Merdina Bug, Mrs. Bug, who's now their cook and housekeeper extraordinaire. And Arch is supposed to be the one who is an overseer for Jamie while Roger is gone. Well, he and Roger are gone when they have to go with the militia, whatever. And so frees Roger up to do other things that Jamie needs a trusted son to do. Though Roger doesn't know that yet. So, and I couldn't tell if that was Archbug because I was trying to look at his hands and we saw both hands looked like they had fingers. So if any of the rest of you can catch that, I have a 42-inch TV. I do not have a fancy TV. So I couldn't really tell if one of his hands was disfigured or not. So if you could catch that, and I totally missed them the first time through. So when I watched the second time, I was like, oh, the bugs. And it's at 4 minutes, 27 seconds. And so we actually get to hear who it is in the surgery scene following that immediately when Claire tells Mrs. Bug to go do something. So Claire does a quick intake when she has Mr. Farish put on the table. Now, her surgery is wildly wealthy. And again, if you've read the books, the imagery we have is something very small and dark. Claire's always trying to get more light in there. She made sure there was a window, I think facing west, so she would, south or west, so she would get the best light she could for the longest part of the day. It's tiny. This surgery has 2 beds for sick patients. It's got a giant table. It's huge. But again, we need camera crews in there. And we also saw her herb shed, which was amazing today as well. So they appear very wealthy by this. And Claire and Jamie, even in the books, have really good substance wealth. They do not have good liquid wealth. So they basically have, 2 pennies to rub together, but they have a lot of things on paper. The land, now the house, all the tenants, and eventually they should have actual money, but hardly anybody had actual money in the colonies. It was hard to come by. People bartered. It was really your crops and But a lot of cash did not change hands in the way that it does now. It's certainly not like Jocasta having money, okay? So back to Mr. Farish. So Claire does an intake, a quick intake of what's going on, and Claire's like, and you gave him mercury. Like, she just was like, wow. Once the wife told her that she'd given, not only bled him and giving him a purgative, and then she gave him mercury. And Claire was like, there's nothing I can do. And she took her hands off him, I'm sorry. And just watched as the guy died, which I thought was kind of strange that Claire wouldn't have thought, hey, I can try and perform surgery. But it was weird. It was kind of like she just gave up after being annoyed by the woman's actions, which would have been totally conventional actions in that time period. They had been common practice, and Brianna points that out a few times to her mother, which made me pause because all of a sudden she's almost becoming like the parent in this episode, where she's telling her mother, simmer down, like you can't do this. Like she's reminding her where she's at, when Claire has been the one who spent way more time in the past than Brianna, that all of a sudden Claire has amnesia about the culture, which I'll talk more about in a minute. And then she decides, without at all it being normal, that she's going to do an autopsy to confirm that he had a burst appendix. Because that's what she believed based on the symptoms the wife had said. Right? And what is the belly pain, etc. That he probably had a burst appendix. So she just does an autopsy, which would get you put in prison. I think it was against the law, like defiling a body. And it was considered an act of desecration. And physicians would hire grave robbers in that time period to steal bodies so they could learn about the body. If someone didn't give their body to a medical school or somebody to a doctor, that they could study the body. Now, here's my issue with this with Claire. Claire is a well-seasoned, well-skilled surgeon from the 20th century. Unless there is something that completely baffles her to no end, why would she do an autopsy? Unless there is something that is super suspicious and she can't quite figure out what it is. And there's cause for her to want to do it and take that risk. For her to sit there and say it's to help people to know to know what illnesses these people have. She's been there for years. I think this is a huge misstep for her character. I think it's a huge step back. And it makes her look a little lunatic raving. I mean, she seems a little unhinged. And for her to be trying to push this, and then Brianna saying, Mom, is a little over the top. It's very strange to me. Like, I know why this autopsy scene was put here. I know what it's replacing. There's a scene that is pretty outlandish from the book later on that takes place, but it's for a totally different reason. It's still totally outlandish. And what point does it really serve? But there was some reason for it. This here just feels like, dun dun dun, Super Claire, surgeon from the 20th. I know everything and I know better than you bumpkins. Why has Claire all of a sudden forgot the culture that she lives in? And she's so annoyed. Is she bored to tears? She has this gorgeous surgery filled with all these different medicinal plants, etc. She carved herself a really nice stethoscope out of wood. She has an eye exam chart. I don't think she's really baffled by the diseases that these people have. So I'm curious about your thoughts on this. It felt so just, what is happening with Claire? I didn't like it. And I just felt her coming off as just bumbling through the 18th century when she's been there longer. And Brianna's like, girl, back up. Ugh. I was like, when did Brianna get to be the smart one? Maybe Frank did do a better job with her. Like, just, Claire being a bull in a china shop. And that is one adaptation that I just can't get myself around. That Claire lacks the humility and the thoughtfulness and the understanding of where she's at. That TV Claire can just have the worst blinders on. And I'm like, I don't like that Claire very much. I find her hard to be around. So after this happens, Marcelly is out in front of the big house butchering an animal, and Claire spies her and she's like, she'd be a great medical assistant. She doesn't mind blood. Brianna hates blood. It just grosses her out. And Marcelly has the right temperament for it, supposedly, right? So as Claire is trying to have these thoughts about how she's going to get an assistant because Jamie told her to get a lieutenant. You need an assistant, lady. Last episode, she's going to find herself an appropriate assistant. And since Brianna's just not bred for that, she can do Jamie stuff. She can go hunting. She has the administration down. She knows how to run a household. She can do all of the managerial stuff. All of the rich stuff, but she does not want to do the medical stuff. So we see Roger and Bree go shooting. Okay. Roger can't hit anything. Brianna ends up killing a wild turkey while Roger misses the shot, and he feels like he just can't do anything. Jamie doesn't trust him. He's just a colonel to him. He's not really his family. And also thinks there's no threat to them in the backwoods, militarily speaking. So Roger is floundering. He just does not have a place. And the only time we see him looking like he fits in at all is when he's singing and playing an instrument, or he's stepping in as a minister. And that's where he seems to fit, but he has really no skills. And we keep seeing that over and over. That's been a theme, right? So he's feeling a bit inadequate, but Brianna's like, she can do all the things. Well, her daddy prepared her really well for the eventuality in case she decided to be a time traveler. And we find out in this time that he really wants to go back to the 20th. Brianna doesn't. Her family's here. The only person in the 20th with her would be Roger. And now their kiddo. And he says he's not really decided, but we know he's decided because he doesn't fit here. And he's really struggling. And I think that's interesting because usually in a lot of situations like this, like the wife would struggle. Like we saw Claire struggle going to America and being the professor's wife. She was like, oh, like this isn't my thing. I can't just be arm candy. And Brianna has all these skills that really she shouldn't have, but she's really good at being in the 18th, and he's the one who's struggling. And he's insecure. And one thing I'd like to highlight here again is their chemistry has improved a lot. And there's such good chemistry between the two of them and how they're standing together and the way that they're looking at each other. And when she's, helps him try and shoot, and that's at minutes 23:18 in the episode, where it just feels good. It feels right. Now, I still don't know if I love Sophie Skelton as Brianna overall, but I see such a leap for her already in these 2 episodes. I don't know what order they were filmed in, but it's such an improvement that I feel much more settled with her being Brianna. So we're kind of looking at back at Claire, and this is where Roger's involved, is he plays minister. They're supposed to be burying Mr. Farish, but apparently Claire in her wisdom ropes Roger into filling the casket with rocks so she can do a further autopsy on the body, thinking no one's going to find out. Oh, okay. And that they can just sew them up when they're done and give them a proper burial without nobody noticing. Everybody's in everybody's business. They don't have TVs or cell phones or a lot of print material. Most of them don't read. And you don't think they're all going to be up in your business, especially when you have people who have to do every single job. Everything is by hand. Everything is supervised. Like you're hardly ever alone. Somebody's always paying attention to what you're doing because there's a lot of people around. Okay. I'm calling it Clairagance for Claire's arrogance. This reeks of Clairagance. Okay. And I don't buy that she needs this body to study for general purposes. I just don't. And you just know that she's going to get caught. Does she want to get tried as a witch? Like, how is she going to get caught and what's that going to look like? Like, who's going to see it? It's my curiosity. Why does Roger think it's okay? Good gravy. I don't know. So after the funeral, Claire ropes Marcelly. You can say it either way. Matt said Marsali on the after video, after the episode, but it's supposed to be Marcelly like parsley. Okay. So she kind of gets her in her web and wants to, under the guise of wanting to teach her to be an apprentice, a valuable medical assistant, like a nurse. And so she has to have a human cadaver to do this. Not just come into the surgery, whatever days Claire is holding clinic and helping her do all the things that she does, and then having her work on the sketches after each case and talk about it. And really? Okay, you need a cadaver. Boy, that's going to smell good without being on ice or having proper embalming. Marcelly's reaction is amazing. It's just, Lauren Lyle is fabulous as Marcelly. Like, fabulous. I love her. And she, don't make me say it. Is my mother right? Was is my mom right about you? I'm not a witch. But at the same time, she's fascinated by the process. It doesn't bother her at all. She just thinks it could be evil and defilement and wrong. And then Claire is trying to explain, well, God, this is how we learn about God's miracles. And, then Claire had her at stitching him up, like a seamstress at the end. And she agrees. I just think, again, it's very out of character for Claire. The way she's approaching this, I don't like the over the top. It's strange to me. I can't quite. It doesn't feel right. And somebody on the Dream of Outlander group, on the thread that we have, maybe Claire's so worried for her family, so worried about anybody getting sick. This guy had appendicitis. It's not like he came in with smallpox or something. People get appendicitis. Like all of a sudden she's creating all this stuff in her head. It's like, you need to do something else, Claire. You need a hobby. So, but she's sure they can't get caught. Like, oh yeah, like Mrs. Bug isn't going to find a way into the herb shed. Okay. So we see another heightening of this aggravation in Claire as the women at the Ridge are making tallow and beeswax candles. Now the tallow candles, they're smelly, they don't last as long, but they're inexpensive, but they create more indoor pollution. The beeswax ones last longer, they don't smoke a lot, they're lovely, but they're very expensive. Because beeswax is harder to come by, even though Claire has hives that, like we saw, they're still very pricey. So the tallow candles are going to be used most often. And as these women talk about a treatment, one of her sons burned his hand, Claire's like, oh, honey is really good for, to stop infection. It's true, honey is a great surface product to use. But then when she hears about what the physician told this mother to do and what gave this kid a purgative, and these women are like, well, why wouldn't we try it if it's supposed to help? Honey's supposed to be, old wives' tale. Yeah, that's what the doctor said. And it's really interesting that Claire is so pissed that they're believing the doctor, but she wants them to believe her because she's a doctor. Okay. Again, I roll. I lifted my hand up like I don't understand. And so after these women kind of make fun of her for what she says and don't believe what she says, she decides that she's so disgusted that she has to write down recommendations under the pseudonym Dr. Rawlings. Dr. Rawlings' recommendations is what her pages are going to say. And she's hand copying one for every household, for every woman, mother, whatever, and on the Ridge. And Brianna's like, how are you going to explain how you know all this stuff? It's not common wisdom, right? It goes against what they're supposed to be doing. Like, they haven't been there long enough for people to understand her authority as a healer. These people are new to them, and they haven't been with her long enough to know what she can and can't do. Okay? Even though many of them have been treated by her, obviously. But Fanning in Hillsborough says, wish your wife was here. We need a skilled surgeon like her because she's the one who did surgery on him at the play last season. So some people understand her credibility where others are like, girl, they just don't know her well enough yet. And so she's offended by it. And Brianna again is reminding her, okay, this is probably all right, but remember Ottertooth and saying things and nobody believing him? How are you going to explain that, Mom? So yes, it seems like Claire is being the parent to a petulant teenager here. Brianna's in touch with the culture, and Claire is again completely out of touch with it after living there much longer. So then Roger goes to see Claire because of his lack of ability to shoot. Now this kind of baffled me here. And I look forward to when the season is over and we can get the Blu-ray and we can look at the deleted scenes or extended scenes, because I am perplexed as all get out by this. She does an eye exam to see if she can figure out why he's a poor shot. So apparently Claire can do dentistry. She can do general surgery. She can do great surgery, but, she doesn't have the tools for all of that. She can do general family practice doctoring. She can midwife people and catch babies. She's an herbalist. So, and she is an optician. So she's pretty well-rounded. So she does an eye exam to see if she can figure out why he's a poor shot. She comes to no conclusion. Now, I want to know why this decision was made in light of the material this scene was adapted from. So poor Roger just thinks he's a crappy shot. He's not good at anything. So it's going to further erode his esteem and how he feels about his place on the ridge, right? And in the book, she does come up with an appropriate diagnosis. If you'd like to know what that is and you haven't read the book, please let me know. And I will send you the passage that comes from the book. So Roger thinks it could maybe be psychological because he was raised by a minister and he doesn't really want to shoot anybody. Okay, well, I guess that's possible, but he's a pretty capable dude. So I think if he could learn to be a good shot, he could be a good shot. But he actually has a vision problem. But I don't know if he's going to have a vision problem in the show. So then he and Claire start talking about going back to the 20th, and she really wants Brianna and Jeremiah and Roger to go back because it's safer, and I just can't keep you safe, and I try so hard to make this a safer place for everybody, but I just can't. Claire, everything isn't about you. But okay, I get that. She's feeling ineffectual. Maybe it's because Jamie wasn't around. Maybe it's because he's gone for a week or 2 weeks. She just doesn't have him there to rein her in. I don't know. The issue is they can't go back until they know whether or not Jemmy, can hear the stones. Is he a traveler too? Well, with 2 traveling parents, 100% he should be a traveler. But what happens if Bonnet is the father? Then Jemmy might not be able to travel. But with the mother as a traveler, maybe. I wonder which one of Claire's parents were travelers, because we'll never know. So we keep bringing that up. So that's going to obviously be a storyline we need to watch. So the next thing we see with this weird thing that's going on with Claire, where all of a sudden she's obsessive, is that she's baking all this bread. 12 loaves of bread or more. So much bread. And Mrs. Budd goes to get Brianna to say, your mother has lost her mind. And Claire's like, no, because she's going to put it out to mold. She's also having Marsley collect food for the pigs, scraps from people to see if she can get penicillin spores. Because you harvest the liquid from the penicillin mold to see if you have live penicillin. Okay? I don't know how easy it would be to actually do it and identify it. I wanted to try it at home. I just haven't had the time. But so Claire's got, she's putting all this bread under glass to mold. And after Mrs. Bug leaves, Brenna's like, you are out of your mind. She might be right. And she thinks that Claire might be playing God here. Claire's like, well, you played God by coming back to warn us about the fire and try and save our life. Big eye roll. Brianna's worried that it's going to mess with something. Now, here's the thing. Time travel conundrums, right? Diana's explanation is that time is not a straight line. That things are just going on, just like in Doctor Who. It's timey-wimey. And if something is meant to happen, if you can't change the past, but you're in the past, and you're saving people or this, that, and the other, then you're supposed to be there to save those people. Like, there is no you not being there. You're supposed to be there. So she's supposed to be saving the people she saves. She's supposed to be introducing the stuff she introduces. Okay? So are this worry that Claire has, does it seem reasonable, like for her to be freaking out? Well, what if Jimmy gets a scratch on his knee and it can get infected and he could die? Well, it's true, he could. Or anybody else. Like, all of a sudden you're going to start inventing things to worry about? Okay, like, where is this coming from? And then at the end of it, again, clairagance, she says, so time, space, history be damned. That's what she tells Brianna. Oh, okay. Because I'm going to do it because I think it's right. All right, Claire. You need somebody to help you with this. You're a little over the top. Her character feels out of balance in this episode. So the final stretch that we see when it comes to Claire, Roger, Brianna, this episode, is Roger being totally in his element as Jemmy's dad, and he has his guitar out and he's singing Jeremiah is a Bullfrog, and it's so cute. And he goes to take a basket of whatever items in for Brianna to their cabin and accidentally discovers Brianna's sketches of Bonnet and that she's done many of them, and they're very dark. I don't even know if he knows that Bonnet's alive. Like, she didn't tell him. So he may know nothing if Jamie didn't tell him. Claire may not even know. So now he's like, oh, crap, this is going on. So that just tells us, keep your eye on it. And then the very next and the last scene of the episode, Bonnet is at Wilmington and is doing business with some of Jocasta's contemporaries. And they're at some kind of gambling establishment, acting as a fight club right now. And it's made clear in this scene that Bonnet's past has been erased and cleared from the crown, and he's a free man. And after the fight that we see between two women, another man who's participating in this place calls Bonnet a cheater. And Bonnet feels his honor has been called into question, so he wants to settle it like a gentleman, and they are the ones who fight next. And it's a sword fight. And the guy yields after he gets stabbed by Bonnet. But Bonnet doesn't kill him or allow the man to yield as he should have. he viciously blinds the man. And it really highlights just how deeply disturbed this character is, and that he has his own code. I think just like Jamie does, but Jamie uses his code for the betterment of people overall, and Bonnet uses his code for the betterment as he sees it for himself only. And when one of the men follows him out and basically thinks this is a change of character for Bonnet, which we know it's not. And when he asks Bonnet why, Bonnet says that he's a father now and has to set a good example. I think that's what he said. It's not verbatim. And so we know that there's more Bonnet to come this season, right? And that he's not a character that is going away quietly, because now he's not even being hunted. So the only people looking for him are the people that Jamie has put feelers out with. Whoo! Okay. That was a lot. So the theme of this episode is two fires. You know, the being in between. So we have, should they stay in the 18th or go back to the 20th, Brianna and Roger? 20th century medicine versus current medicine, Claire. She's like fighting in between those two fires. The Crown versus the regulators. There's Murtaugh and Jamie are like in that. What do you do? What's right? And then Marcelly has kind of her mother on her shoulder, and now this relationship with her stepmother, with Claire, and her kind of Claire has stepped in. I mean, Marcelly was, how old was she in the show? 16, 17, I think. She's, I think, 15 in the book. So, but she's been with Claire for a long time. And as a side note, yes, she's pregnant with her third child, not her second. So I did get that wrong. So she had 1, 2, because the baby, and now she's pregnant again. So she's going to have a passel of babies very soon. Whew, that was a big episode. So we definitely have some things. And I really do appreciate the strength of Jamie, and that he's really kind of standing up on his own. And it's, if we're going to have Murtaugh, it's, yeah, I think he's coming to an end, and we're going to see that battle coming very soon. And I do wonder what Hunter and husband, what role they're going to play, if any. I mean, since Murtaugh sort of usurped who they are in the adaptation, I'm really curious, like, what's going to happen with that. And I'm wondering why husband isn't a Quaker. Quakers are very interesting, and there are a lot of Quakers moving forward in the story. And I hope we get to see them, because it's such an amazing culture. It is. It's really fascinating. And I don't know if you know this, but President Richard Nixon was raised a Quaker. So, hey, he was a friend. So that's that. So if you are not in the A Dram of Outlander group on Facebook, please go over there and ask to join. There's also a Facebook page, A Dram of Outlander, to follow. The website, of course, is adramofoutlander.com. I know, shocking, right? Instagram and Twitter are Dram of Outlander without the A in front. Didn't have enough letters. And the email is contact@adramofoutlander.com. And the voicemail is 719-425-9444. Please leave me a message, and I would love to know what your thoughts, your questions, your comments, your feels, whatever corrections and criticisms you have for me. I would love to hear about them. I do. Especially because I do this podcast solo. that it's really easy for me to go down rabbit holes and thought processes because I don't have somebody else like all the other podcasters who do anything on the show. They have each other to bounce off of. I have me and I have you to be my mirror. So I love having any feedback from you possible. It just makes my day. But so I think the feedback that I've gotten so far is that people think that Murtagh is not going to live and that Claire seems really over the top and that Jamie is doing an awesome job taking his path, that Marcelly is really cool, and that Stephen Bonnet is just horrible. And like some of you, I watched that scene. No, as soon as I saw him pull that to the front of that man's face, I covered my eyes. That was hard enough to read about in the book. To see it on screen just makes it so much worse. He's just treacherous. And somebody said he was like Blackjack Randall. And I was like, well, Blackjack Randall had a very private malevolence about him. He didn't do things in public. He tortured people in private. He used his power over individuals. He didn't care if they were male or female. It was power. He loved that. He was definitely a sadist. Stephen Bonnet is a mercenary who's in it for himself, and he has his own twisted code and how he should get to his goals. And whatever he chooses, that's the right thing to do. It has nothing to do with anybody else. He's an egoist. And I think of the two, Stephen Bonnet is probably the scarier one overall, because Blackjack Randall had, in very distinct spaces, he had the control and power. It wasn't everywhere he went. It wasn't in every aspect of his life. Stephen Bonnet runs his life that way. He doesn't follow any societal rules. He doesn't follow anything in public or private. He just does it. So I think he's probably the one who's the worst. Psychologically, Blackjack is worse. Way worse. But he's dead now. Whatever. But psychologically, way worse. And where he had power, it was absolute. And it was deep. But Bonnet, he just takes it everywhere he goes. And he doesn't care who he hurts or why. So there you go. There's that. So I look forward to next week's episode. When we saw the preview, I actually gasped and I said out loud, oh, they're going to do that. Meaning the Beardsleys. I am a little surprised that they're going to be doing the Beardsley cabin. And wow, it's horrible. So those of you who haven't read the book, I'm just going to say, steel yourself for next week's episode. I'm hoping it's not very graphic, and it's pared down for the visual medium. I really do. It's one of the roughest parts of any of the books to get through. And I know a lot of readers who actually skip it because it's so horrifying. So I'm just, crossing my fingers and my toes that visually it'll be handled less brutally than, say, how Stephen Bonnet blinded that guy in this episode. So, okay. So I hope you have a fantastic week and you are well and you are healthy and you find joy. And until next time, Slán Живá.